This is Bad Movies We Love, part of the Sheist Podcast Network.
Hello, Bad Movie Lovers. We're in for a treat today. It's a bonus episode. I think technically it's still going to be Season 2, Episode 13, but that's lucky number 13 because today I brought back a guest for the first time. First repeat guest, joining us once again from the Sheist International Film Club and from our episode on Troll. You know him as Nick's Eclips, and we're gathered today to talk about a Godzilla movie that is pretty polarizing. It's from 1971, and you might know it as Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. You might know it as Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Either way, you might want to grab a poncho or some galoshes, because we're going to team up with Godzilla as we fight pollution and save the Earth.
I think there's a baby crying like in the middle of garbage.
There's 5 old dudes just hanging out in the bushes.
Mastodon, they have no idea what that means.
Lines himself up to this smokestack, and he just starts going to town. I know a stoner when I see one, and Hedorah is a stoner.
I don't like this movie because it reminds me of drugs. Too many drugs, blah.
I can never rely on these morons. He's like, no wonder they could never beat me in the past.
Is this something about Satan or something? They usually do that.
Frankenstein's Kampf gegen die Teufelmonster.
It's afraid of fire. How do you know?
It's spelled like Deborah, so maybe it is Hedorah.
The director, he was banned from directing after this movie.
My man Nix, welcome back to the show. We decided that we're going to do a special bonus episode of Bad Movies We Love for Kaijun. It wasn't really something that I had planned on, but, you know, in watching some of the older ones and just, you know, having fun filling my month with Godzilla movies from the 60s and 70s, I wanted to do it. So I know we had talked about potentially doing a Godzilla's film or a Godzilla theme for Bad Movies We Love, and I think this is a really good opportunity to do it. So thank you for joining me, and welcome back to the show.
I am so happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And today we're talking about Godzilla vs. Hedorah, or Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, however you came across it potentially in your youth or as an adult. I was mostly familiar with the American version of this because I got a lot of these on VHS, and what was it? AIP, American International Pictures, that did the dubbing?
Yes, this was AIP.
So that's probably the version that I had seen growing up many, many times. And it had been a long time since I'd seen this. And I think when I was a kid, it was one of my favorites because it is kind of like goofy and strange and dark, and it has like a different musical element to it than a lot of the other Godzilla films as well. So it kind of like stood out. And, you know, there's a child who's kind of the main protagonist, but also like not exactly. But it's like it's kid friendly, but also it's socially conscious in its approach to Godzilla battling pollution as a very literal metaphor. And then as I had gotten older and I had kind of like put a big gap between me watching some of the goofier stuff from that era, I feel like my memory of Smog Monster maybe didn't do it justice. And I see that it has a 6.0 out of 10 on IMDb, but there's only 6,000 ratings for this. So that's fairly small. So I'm curious, why was it this one that you chose? And if you had to give us a summary of why someone would say this is a bad movie, why do you think that is?
Yeah, this has always been like caused like a big division in the Godzilla fanhood, especially back in the early 90s. Over the years, it's kind of gotten a better, people appreciate it a little more. The reason I picked it is pretty similar to you, because I grew up watching this film when I grew up. I'm old. I grew up in the early 80s, and we had a local television station, Channel 11. And every Saturday at 11 o'clock, they would play a horror or sci-fi or a kaiju film from, it could be the 30s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. You never knew what was going to be playing. And that's where I really first got introduced to Godzilla. And this was one of the first ones I saw. And I think what really turned me onto it was how dark it was, because I've always been really into horror and stuff like that. And the majority of the fight scenes take place in the dark. And I think they look pretty gorgeous, actually. But also a lot of people die in this film, like more than I'd ever think I'd seen in a Godzilla film. But I like the design of Godzilla. I love the design of Hedorah or Hedorah, or however we want to say it. Never quite been sure myself. But I think the reason a lot of people don't like it is very bizarre. It's very psychedelic. Sometimes if you go in and you look at a discussion underneath, a lot of people go, I don't like this movie because it reminds me of drugs, too many drugs, blah. But I think that's kind of its charm. Plus, it's got all the animation that happens throughout there. I find really kind of fascinating. And probably the main reason that most people don't like it, well, I will touch on the music, because you did mention that the music was something that you enjoyed. I'm not a big fan of the new Godzilla theme. It's very goofy. It's very silly. But the rest of the soundtrack is pretty good. And also most of the fights take place in silence, which is pretty cool. But the main reason that most people will probably dislike this with a passion is because Godzilla flies. He tucks his tail between his legs, fires up that atomic breath, and flies across the countryside. That is probably the main reason.
That's surprising. I mean, it is definitely something that stands out because it's the only time that Godzilla flies, and he uses his breath like, propulsion system. And it kind of happens at a point in the movie where, everything has been fairly serious. Like you said, a lot of people die in this movie, and I think we get accustomed to seeing large scale destruction, but you don't typically see just a bunch of dead bodies in a Godzilla film. And so as a kid, I always thought this was like on the goofier side. And then watching it as an adult, I'm like, okay, it's making this social commentary about this problem that was going on in Japan in the 70s. And you're actually, killing on screen a bunch of people. And then in some cases, transforming them into like burned victims of this acid sludge or whatever. Hedorah. It's spelled like Deborah. So maybe it is Hedorah. But yeah, you've got this sludge that sort of like burns everything that it touches, and it's kind of like Godzilla's not involved for a little bit, and they're sort of freaking out, and then he shows up. So I don't know that I would necessarily be completely off put by him flying, but it does come out of nowhere. And I don't know what number this is in the series, but you're almost 20 years deep into Godzilla at this point, and he's never flown. And the physics of it are sort of weird. So it just looks a little goofy on screen. And the idea that he flies faster than this creature that is aerodynamic and shaped sort of like organic UFO, he catches up to him with his breath and just sort of body slams him out of the air. So I could see it's like, okay, this is kind of like a dumb moment in the film, and maybe that turns people off. But overall, I think it's really not a bad movie at all. And I feel like a little bit guilty for thinking that it was like on the bad spectrum to begin with, to be honest.
Yeah, but yeah, I think you probably remembered a lot of the goofier stuff and the stuff with. By the way, the kid's name is actually Ken, which is a running joke with like Mystery Science Theater and Gamera. You've got your Kennys. This is the one Godzilla movie where you actually have a Ken. But yeah, it's the director. I don't have his name pulled up right now. The director after
Yoshimitsu Banno.
Banno, yes. Banno was he was banned from directing after this movie. Tomoyuki Tanaka was in the hospital while it was being filmed, so he didn't really know what was going on. And when he saw the finished product, he was like, "Yeah, that's it. You're." He took him off a bunch of projects he was supposed to direct on. He said, "You're never doing this again." But later on down the line, somehow Banno was involved in helping create the MonsterVerse here with the American versions, which is good for him, man, because I love this movie. Man, it's so different. And again, it's so dark. It's got a lot of beautiful shots in it. A lot of things that don't make sense. You mentioned the sludge, you know, kills and burns everything except that cat.
Well, look, maybe the cat is also like some sort of special creature because I mean, you have a cat, you know, they're otherworldly to begin with.
Cats are magic.
And you had mentioned Tanaka, and that is Tomoyuki Tanaka, and was he the Toho head or he was a producer of some kind? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was basically in charge of all the Godzilla stuff, but couldn't be there because he was in the hospital. So I know at one point they did bring in, I think towards the end of production, they did bring in Ishirô Honda, who directed the majority of the original films, to give him some pointers on how to maybe improve the film, and that may be why sometimes some of the action scenes tend to gloss over some of the stuff that would help it make more sense. I don't know how that happened. That could have been Banno himself. Who knows?
Yeah, Honda actually does have a directing credit, which is surprising because most of the notes about the film itself are strictly relegated to Banno, and whether or not Tanaka actually liked him or disliked him or thought the movie was a disaster, etc. And I read that there was initially a sequel that he had planned that was going to take place in Africa, which is very strange. But when you look at this movie as a piece of the Godzilla universe, it is probably the most different of them. It's the only one that sort of like acknowledges that sort of 60s era psychedelic drug use, any of that. Like the ones that we saw from the 70s definitely have like a 70s identity, and this is 1971, and it definitely has some influences from the 60s that, typically throughout the Godzilla franchise, I don't remember a lot of, stuff that was super popular in the States necessarily making its way into sort of the lexicon of Godzillas. So I could see that being off-putting, but I liked it so much more than I anticipated. And it is crazy. It's wild. Like it just starts becoming like a cartoon at some point. Like literally, there's just animated sequences that I don't know if they were designed specifically to save on budget in some scenes, or because it was aimed at kids, or this is just a creative choice to go in with sort of the psychedelia. But it's very out there for a Godzilla movie, and that's probably why it fell into the realm of sort of being a bubble film for a lot of people.
Well, Banno had done documentaries beforehand, and so I guess you could kind of see that kind of came from that sort of structure. Especially remember the talking head scene where the TV screens, there were like multiple screens and everybody's talking over each other. I think there's a baby crying like in the middle of garbage and stuff. I mean, it was, you could kind of think of it as him kind of pulling that history into the film as well.
I'm just thinking of the poor baby crying in the middle of this toxic waste. Let's watch the trailer though, because we always watch the trailer on this show, and I'm curious to see like how this is marketed back in the 70s and what it's supposed to be. Let me grab my screen share.
Is this the Japanese or the American?
No, this is the American one because if there is any spoken dialogue, we got listeners and not viewers. So I feel like I owe it to the people that are actually going to listen to this that we're going to have this in English. As goofy and wild as it may be, here we go. Before we get to the trailer, this episode of Bad Movies We Love is brought to you by Kaiju Kush. Hey, what's up, Godzilla lovers? I'm here to tell you about... Wait, what am I telling them about?
Kaiju Kush.
Oh yeah, that's right. Kaiju Kush. Japan's finest marijuana can now be yours. What's the line again?
Can you read?
Yeah?
Then just read the prompter.
Oh, cool. Kaiju Kush is hydroponic Japanese cannabis. That means it's grown completely in water. Whoa, no way. Descending from a long lineage of Shiatsu Kush on the island of Amami Oshima and grown in secret for hundreds of years. What? This colossal strain was mixed with Godfather Kush from foreign travelers and perfected into the potent flower we know today. This shit is radioactive. It'll have you purring like a kitten and curled up on the couch watching a Godzilla movie in no time. That sounds good to me. That's Kaiju Kush, imported by legendary growers. Well, it's PG. Okay.
Well, it's been PG and then G and then PG again.
Out of the polluted waters it came, to become the most fearful menace that ever threatens mankind. Feeding, growing ever more deadly on smog. Only one force dared stand up to its overpowering evil. Godzilla! Godzilla versus the smog monster. Will Godzilla, man's friend, be vanquished?
There's that theme.
Yeah.
More than 1,600 dead have been reported, while other casualties are expected to exceed 30,000.
There's all those dead bodies.
The main storage tank of the Japan Oil Company has exploded.
I do love these transformation sequences they did.
Nothing man can do can stop the smog monster.
Also very trippy.
Mm-hmm.
Can Godzilla save the Earth from this mastodon of destruction?
Mastodon.
Who wrote the voiceover script for this?
I don't know. They may have farmed it out to, an advertising company, or it might have been AIP. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Watch out for those mastodons.
Mastodon. They have no idea what that means.
Yeah, apparently not.
I'm imagining a sludge mastodon now.
I mean, I'm kind of surprised that throughout all of the Godzilla movies and all the different kaiju that they had to make over the years, I think maybe the new Monsterverse has one that sort of looks like an elephant.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
But aside from that, like, it's the largest living land mammal right now. You think it'd be an easy thing to pull from, but I don't know. They went with, Anguirus instead, who crawls around on his knees.
Poor Anguirus.
Yeah, but that trailer, like, it doesn't like oversell it, but it doesn't undersell it either. It's Godzilla versus a monster. This time it's sludge. It doesn't like it doesn't really get you into this thing of this is a piece of political commentary. It gives you this, hey, this is a Godzilla movie, and he just happens to be fighting a monster made of pollution. And they use the term Godzilla's going to save the earth. And I think they even refer to him as man's friend in that. And this is definitely one of the more friendly Godzillas in terms of how he interacts with people. And I thought it was just sort of suggested at some point, but towards the end of the film, there is a moment where he does like give this kid a psychic message. And like that happened, didn't it?
The kid has visions
That's
that
what I
Godzilla,
thought.
yeah, that Godzilla's going to show up and he's going to try to take care of the smog monster. But the one that really got me was at the end. Godzilla's walking away. He's fine. He's beat up. He's tired. He's going home. All of a sudden, he stops and he turns around. And I'm like, what's he doing? And all of a sudden, there's the little kid running up with his brother and sister or whatever, just so he can say goodbye. Godzilla just knew he was coming. So I guess they had some kind of psychic link.
Yeah, because they're like, I thought it was just, oh, this kid is having visions. And okay, that makes sense. It's not the only movie where a kid sort of imagines being buddies with Godzilla. And I mean, me growing up with these movies as well, I was like, hey, it would be great to have Godzilla as a friend because, you get bullied and then, hey, you've got Godzilla as your backup. That's great. But there comes a point where like he really does say that Godzilla sent him a psychic message, and he then says Godzilla's here and Hedorah's here, and then they both show up. So it's possible, I guess, that the kid is just like more observant than everybody, because I think at that point they're having like a bonfire concert on the top of Mount Fuji in preparation for the monsters that are going to show up, which they know are going to show up. And they decide to go and have a little festival up there before Godzilla and Hedorah show up to duke it out towards the end.
That always kind of confused me, and I paid a little bit more attention this time. But it turns out that basically Hedorah's basically gonna overrun the world eventually. So they're just like, fuck it, let's have a big party before it happens, and we can't go do it anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm kind of with them on that. And again, this is like coming from the 60s element that's in it, sort of like the free love, let's just go get it while we can kind of attitude. And I do love that about it, that it has this like weird energy to it. But then when you talk about specifically the introduction of the score here, the, I guess, alternate Godzilla music, that bwah, bwah, that kind of like, I don't know where. Yeah, I don't know why that choice got made. It is a more, I guess, heroic tone for Godzilla showing up, although it is, I don't know, it's a little goofy if that's what you're going for. But if this
Yeah.
is like marketed for kids and it's just, hey, the big guy's here, then it's just kind of like, hey, da-da, da-da, that kind of thing going on. But then there's also a very weird sort of like banjo score that goes on for Hedorah, as well, as you sort of see the extent
Yeah.
of the pollution, and they just show you the sort of like the oily sludge that's covering the water, and they kind of give you a montage of dead fish and oceanic pollution on a large scale. So interesting that they decided to like ditch a long history of very good, very well considered music to go in this new direction. And I could see why Tanaka, being, in charge of all this and also being hospitalized, would be upset, because it's like, hey, well, I'm in the hospital over here. You're fucking up Godzilla. I told you could do what you wanted, but you didn't tell me you were going to do this.
Right. And this guy only did music for one other film. It was the one right after this one, which is Gigan.
Which I just watched recently, which is also not a great one.
Not a great one. It's got one of the longest monster fights ever, to where it actually gets a little tiring. But there's a lot of fun stuff in that too.
Yeah, of course there is. I mean, that's a whole different show. But I think it stays within the realm of like sort of kind of like creative goofiness. I mean, that one's got a guy that like draws kaiju, and one of them's a homework monster, and then there's a reporter who steals a tape, but there's also a Godzilla theme park. So there's Godzilla that destroys Japan, yet they've built a multi-100-foot tall installation and opened a theme park around it to celebrate Godzilla. Very, very confusing as to what's going on. And then there's aliens, of course, because every other Godzilla movie's aliens. And in fact, apparently Hedorah is an alien in this one, although that's very it's sort of softballed in there later in the film, because we see him first in the ocean. They do some great miniature work with those boats that he destroys.
Oh yeah.
That first introduction to him is great. And then later in the movie, they just say he like came to this planet to eat the pollution. And so we don't really get any of that backstory. They just sort of like, steamroll it because we're already knee deep in the action at that point. And there's quite a bit of action. I think this is up there, if not the longest on-screen time for Godzilla from that Showa era.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wish I would have looked that up, because that's always a contention with a lot of people. Like, oh, there's barely any Godzilla in this Godzilla film. But yeah, there's quite a bit going on. I would also point out that in this universe, in this film, they've made action figures and toys of Godzilla, who has also destroyed so many of their cities. And I was so jealous of little Ken here when I saw that movie as a kid. I'm like, oh, look at what he's doing. He's gonna break them, sliding them down that slide.
Yeah, but I was so into it as well. I'm like, oh man, he's really got a lot of great like monster toys here, and got a huge collection, which gets sludged on later, of course, but nonetheless, like we're in a universe of Godzilla where the corporations have manufactured toys. And I mean, realistically, these are toys that were being manufactured for the films, and the fact that this stuff is real in Japan. But in the movie, it's also acknowledging that, hey, the corporations are just making these kind of toys at this point and embracing Godzilla as a hero of mankind and not a problem. And for the most part, he doesn't show up and really destroy any property in this, like at least not him alone.
Not
He's
on
not just
purpose.
he's not just wandering through the city smashing a bunch of things. He's not just out for a casual stroll where his tail's got a mind of its own, just accidentally whips a building every now and then, blows some shit up. So there's like a lot of explosions, there's a lot of property damage in this, but it's almost exclusively Hedorah's involvement in that sort of primes Godzilla being responsible. Because, when he shoots that atomic breath round, some shit's going to get exploded, and you can't really do anything about that. He's not the best with it. Although later in this film, we start to see that his conscious use of his atomic breath is a lot better, and he starts to become more intelligent as the films go on as well. And this is one that displays his intelligence on like almost a near human level at some points.
Oh yeah, I don't know if we're gonna go through the movie itself, but yeah, at the end, when the military's plan fails again, he looks at him and he's like, ugh, and then uses his breath again. So yeah, it's like he knows that the people are involved in stuff. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that moment that you're speaking of, they have lost power to their machine that they're trying to use on the smog monster. And he's sort of got it like in a wrestling hold, like he's got its arms tied back, and he's sitting there holding Smog Monster, and he sees that they can't get the power turned on. He sort of like shakes his head at them like, these idiots.
Yes.
I can never rely on these morons. He's like, no wonder they could never beat me in the past. And then he lights up the panel with his atomic breath, and everything goes according to plan from then on out. But I wanted to ask you too, since you are somewhat of a Godzilla historian, does every Godzilla movie have a scientist as one of the main characters? Because as I'm thinking about it, a lot of the ones that I can think of right off the top of my head, yes, there is a scientist that is directly involved.
Directly involved. I gonna say I don't think so. But I'm just thinking back to, I remember Godzilla Raids Again, which you and I have, we probably have differing opinions on. I mean, that the main characters are like they help with fishing, like they're pilots and stuff.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think and they were there may have been a scientist in there, but he's definitely not mainly involved, I don't think.
Good point. And I think maybe it's just, hey, when you need a scientific solution to your problem, we're going to put a scientist involved in the story on some level. And like, I was so confused in watching this at the beginning because there's a scuba diver and his son. And so the son and him go out to the ocean, scuba diver goes in, Hedorah's there floating around. And I totally thought he dies. And then
Yeah,
we come back and it's like, no, just his face is melted. And turns out he's the scientist. And
right.
then he's like in bed in pain for a lot of the movie. But then he still gets up and invents the machine that is used at the end of the movie. And then after that, we cut back and he's like back in bed and in pain again. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what was going on, but I totally like thought the setup for it was that he dies and then the kid and his mom or whatever are, you know, having their psychic link with Godzilla. But it turns out, no, his dad was a scientist and his dad came up with the tech that was needed to take care of this because they were studying the sludge tadpoles in the very beginning.
Yeah. So one of the fishermen brings him the tadpole that he found. It's like, I found a really weird thing. And so I mean that's our first clue that he's the scientist, and then he goes scuba diving. And it's funny you bring up that scene, man. After so and get a little personal. My dad died when I was 13 years old, and that would have been like 1987. I'd already seen this film, but the next time it came on, when that kid was standing on the side of the ocean and just screaming out for his dad, oh, brought me to tears. I mean, absolutely crushed me. And then surprise, he's alive. He's pretty much okay.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's why it like resonated with me more because my dad passed when I was 7. And then,
Oh Lord.
so my mom, like, she had gotten these Godzilla tapes from work, and it was kind of just like she like sat me down. And I would like just play them one by one. And so maybe that had something to do with the way I saw this particular scene in this movie is like it seems very much like he dies because we never see him come out of the ocean. And the
Yeah.
kid, like you said, is just on the bank screaming for his dad. And then it's like, oh no, he just kind of like got his face burnt and, you know, maybe he's wounded beyond that, but we don't really know. But then he's up and about doing science and very interesting, you know, tonal decision considering that so many people in the movie die and especially people that just are exposed to Hedorah in like small doses also die. He just flies over and a bunch of dead bodies everywhere. So this guy who got sludged straight up in the face does not die. I very, very confusing. But in that scene where he's sort of like down by the rocks and he's looking up and you see Hedorah swimming overhead and he's sort of just like waiting to figure out what happens, reminded me a lot of that same sort of sequence that we see in Jaws, which came 5 years after this. And you've got Richard Dreyfuss who loses his dart gun, goes down to the bottom of the ocean. He's just kind of hiding while he looks up and sees Jaws destroying the cage. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Spielberg watched this movie and, you know, was like, hey, this is a good visual representation of sort of what I'm going for here. And I think there was somebody else who ended up being a big Godzilla fan as well. There was an American director who I can't think of off the top of my head, but it would not surprise me because Spielberg was making movies around the same time. This is a very weird one. And it turns out that this movie is in the Criterion Collection. So of all the Godzilla movies that exist, I don't know how many of them are officially in the collection, but I know for sure the first one. And this one is spine number 1,000. So this one's in there too. So I think that says a lot though, that this movie, despite it being divisive and weird and goofy and completely like offbeat from the rest of them, made it into the Criterion Collection.
Criterion released the first 14 Showa era, so starting with Godzilla all the way up to Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Sweet.
A lot of them don't include like the AIP cuts, which is really disappointing. Instead, they include the international cuts that Toho had done that we didn't really see over here. I mean, they're not bad, but I mean, you want Save the Earth when you're watching Godzilla versus a smog monster.
Yeah. So speaking of that, I was disappointed because I love that song, and it's like part of what the weird identity of this is. And the Japanese version of the song is not even bad at all. But we're gonna listen to Save the Earth right now. And if I get in trouble for it, I'll erase it from the episode later. But for now, we're gonna save the Earth because we didn't get to, because I watched the Japanese one and I didn't get to save the Earth. So
Really? You didn't watch the link I sent you?
no, because I was upstairs in bed watching on the TV. So
okay.
so
Okay, cool.
I only had one choice, and that was to watch what was on I think it was what, Max? Yeah, must have been Max.
Animals, God's animals, don't go away, don't go. Flowers, my flowers, don't go away.
So we get this lady singing in front of like a giant lava lamp.
It's full of mercury. Too many fumes in our oxygen. All the smog now is choking you and me.
Somebody made a whole music video out of it.
Yeah.
Got to get it back someday.
And I heard that when they wrote the English lyrics, they tried to line it up with the Japanese mouth movements as well. This was pretty impressive.
Moving to the moon now. It's up to us to make a choice. We know what it's worth to save the earth. Come raise your voice.
They just
Everybody save the earth! Come on, save the earth!
I do like this music video cut though. Oh, we get to see the jetpack.
Perfect. That's a sweet shot right there.
There we go. Adrian Russ was the vocalist for the English version of that. So I had to, man.
I think Adrian Russ is actually, he just composed the lyrics.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think he's from AIP.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes perfect sense then. No, performer Adrian Russ. Music by Richiro Manabe. Huh. Either way. Good times. I missed that song. I mean, it was like my favorite part of it when I was a kid. So
yeah,
of course, because it's great. You had mentioned sort of at the outset about like one of the reasons that maybe people didn't like this, and one of those things was sort of like implied drug culture, maybe. And there's a moment pretty early on where Hedorah is sort of in its like evolutionary phase. It's growing, and it similar to like what we see from Godzilla sort of absorbing like nuclear energy or radiation or pollution in other movies. Hedorah finds himself at some sort of factory, and he lines himself up to this smokestack, and he just starts going to town. And his eyes are super red and bloodshot. And I mean, that's part of the character design as well. But I'm like, oh, he looks faded. He's so stoned. And I didn't even realize like that he purrs like a cat while he's smoking these smokestacks. Yeah. And then Godzilla shows up to, bust him. And Hedorah's lost in the sauce at this point. And you could tell like he doesn't know how to fight at all. Like his first move is like, I'm just jumping towards Godzilla. And he sort of just lands on him. And then they get into this huge scuffle that's very unorthodox. And it's sort of like Godzilla fighting a wet blanket at this point. And, Godzilla eventually finds a way to get Hedorah off of him, goes to his patented like tail grab where he picks him up, he's slamming him around, he starts swinging him. And then we get the sequence as he's swinging him around. There's giant sludge balls flying in every direction. And there's one poor Mahjong game that gets hit 3 times. First, it's just some splatter on the window. And then the big sludge ball goes in there and all those guys die. But interesting to think that of all the things they could show, they just show it landing in the same place 3 times. I mean, it's probably budget. We're not trying to like show you too many locations here. But I felt so horrible. I'm like, Godzilla doesn't really have like intentional aim here, but he hits that same place 3 times. And then we get back to Godzilla and sort of Hedorah has a weird like motion to him. He doesn't really know what to do. He's not aggressive. So he just kind of like sidesteps and then he tries to dive at him again. And Godzilla sees it coming that time. Godzilla dodges. We get Hedorah hitting the ground. Then a bunch of smoke flies out of his face. And I'm like, see, he's baked out of his mind right now. No wonder he can't fight. But the miniature work in that first fight scene is just awesome. I mean, some of the Godzilla movies don't do as good of a job, but when it's done really, really well, man, it looks so good. And I think this one in particular looks very good on camera.
Yeah, the fight scene, that opening fight scene, the way it's lit, the way it's shot, the miniatures, everything really pretty much works. It's that's one of the things that really helped me fall in love with it when I first saw it, because I'd never really seen one look quite like that. As for the drug thing, you know what, I'd never thought about it, but you're right, because as he sucks more and more of the smokestacks, which is a great visual, that effect looks amazing as well. Yeah, his eyes, the red fades and his eyes start to close. Like he's like, yeah, I'm so baked, I'm just gonna close my eyes for a bit and listen to some music. The sound design, like all of the sound effects for Hedorah, they're disgusting, they're interesting. This is one of the grossest Godzilla films I've ever seen. It is so disgusting, so much sludge. I mean, I think in this one as well, Godzilla slams him down and just a whole bunch of sludge comes gushing out of him as well. And it's just, so gross, but so cool. And then of course, they end up on Mount Fuji at the end. It's still got a great, backdrop. It's still great, but yeah, this had a much lower budget than the movie that came before it. And I can't remember what movie came before, but yeah, so they had to cut down on that. They couldn't do so many miniatures. I guess they spent most of that budget on that very opening one.
Yeah, and as we saw when we were doing the watch of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, we see that that's similar, like, what is it? Time-lapse face change effect that we saw with the monkey alien people was used here when people get sludged by Hedorah, and they have this sort of like frame-by-frame slow change effect. So you could see like some of the techniques that they had used in this movie went on to be used again in some of the other films. And, sort of while we were watching the trailer, I had remarked on the transformation animation that they used for Hedorah. And I mean, really, it's very, very impressive, because when I watched it yesterday, I couldn't tell, like, did they fill up the physical suit with sort of like lighting so that they could turn it on and off during that sequence? Because I know some of it is like animated over the top of the cell as he goes from standing Hedorah back to spaceship Hedorah back to standing Hedorah. There's a pink glowing outline, you see a bunch of sparkles, but it looks like there was some sort of like lighting cue that they put into the costume itself. And I kind of want to go back and watch just that moment of it, but I love the way that they chose to do that, because yeah, you can't really like show it transform. So considering this is 1971 and like how they're going to make it work, and at that point in the film they had told us that, hey, we get like sea creature, then he's sort of like transformed from tadpole to amphibian, and he's crawling, and then he ends up flying, and then we find out that he can just kind of switch between flight and standing. And also, like, when I see him standing, I feel like, well, it's kind of like an awesome costume, it also looks like he's the mascot for like a plumbing company or something. It's like, you know, you call Roto-Rooter, we're going to get these turds out of your pipes. But the way that they did like the massive headpiece on this costume in comparison to some of the other Godzilla costumes, like the head design is fantastic. Like it has motorized eyelids that are fairly large, like the big red eyes, like the very defined, colorful iris. I love the sort of look of his, I guess, his face, and then seeing the different transitional phases of Hedorah as well. Like you see, they did cut some corners, of course, because they didn't have a choice, but ultimately, like it looks really good, especially like in the low lit fight scenes.
Yeah, I'm thinking for the initial, like, to signify the transformation, they might have just set off some flashes like underneath
Yeah.
the suit. But later when he's got his tadpole, he's got his little frog amphibian thing, he's got his flying one, and then he's got his final one. That one is huge. He's bigger than Godzilla. He
Yes.
is gigantic. And then they put something in where when he's getting ready to use his laser beam, you
Mhm.
see that top part of his head starts to like expand and
Yeah.
turn red. Yeah, that was pretty impressive. They really got really creative with that. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how they did it, but it is damn impressive.
Yeah, I would encourage anybody, if you don't want to watch the whole movie, that's, you know, that's fine. I get it. But I would encourage anybody that listens to this to at least check out some of like the highlights of this particular transformation sequence we're talking about, because I feel like it's a very good marriage of practical effects and then what was available in terms of like, you know, digital VFX at the time. And like this is 1971. So it had to be done in a way that makes sense for the tone of the film and still somewhat look good. And I think this is just very, very good job of doing that, because like I think even at this point, Godzilla's breath like hasn't really evolved that much on screen. It still isn't even like that blue, I guess. I mean, it's like starting to get more blue, but it's still like kind of gray. So they haven't like evolved the VFX like that far at the point that this movie came out. But I love that transformation sequence. And, you know, since you mentioned the costume, I think now's probably a good time to go to trivia.
Okay, well, I wanted to bring up one more thing about the costume before we do.
All right, go for it.
I love the way when he finally hits that final form, they're on Mount Fuji, it's dark. He's glittering. Like they put like this glitter all over him, and it really gives him this ethereal look. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then I don't know if you noticed, but Godzilla only has 3 toes in this one.
Oh, I got to go back and look at that. This is a different suit design where he's only got 3 toes.
Yeah. Let's do trivia.
Let's do trivia.
Time for trivia.
Okay, so speaking of the person in the Hedorah suit, that was Kenpachiro Satsuma. He was the
Woohoo!
only one strong enough to support the weight of the costume. Approximately how much did the costume weigh?
I didn't know you're going to be quizzing me on the trivia. I thought you were just going to tell it to me. I'm going to say 250.
Pretty close. It was rumored to weigh 300 pounds, suspended a little bit by wires to, of course, help him out. But part of the reason he got the job because he was the only one that could like effectively wear the suit. And then Kenpachiro went on to be Gigan in the next 2 films, and then eventually wore the Godzilla costume itself for Godzilla 1985. And I believe he wore it until Godzilla vs. Destroya in 95. So
Yep.
sort of almost, if you think about it, a little bit similar to the way that like pro wrestling gives its title belts out, right? So he finally got to be wearing the World Heavyweight Championship, and that just came in the form of a giant rubber Godzilla suit for 10 years. So congrats to Kenpachiro. before his retirement on Destroya. Question number 2, the prop that they used for Godzilla flying was used in one other Godzilla film. And what film is that?
Was it Monster Zero?
Correct. Bingo. Also known as Invasion of Astro Monster, but you and I both grew up with it, knowing it as Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, which is a very cool name in and of its own. Godzilla vs. Hedorah is the only one where Godzilla voluntarily flies himself under his own control. In Astro Monster, him and Rodan are sort of sucked out of the mountainside in the fetal position and abducted by aliens. And that's a whole nother movie that's also awesome in its own weird, bizarre way. But
it's great.
Not for this show, but another time maybe. And third and final question. In the German version of the film, Frankenstein's Kampf gegen die Teufelmonster, the name Hedorah was changed to what?
Oh, Germany, you guys are insane. Was this something about Satan or something? They usually do that.
Yeah, so the literal translation, I think, had something to do with Teufelmonster, I think, is like devil monster, but the name Hedorah was changed to Hydrox, not to be confused with the chocolate cream-filled cookies, which most of us think is a knockoff of Oreo, but actually existed 4 years earlier.
They're the originals.
There you go. So you get some Oreo cookie trivia with your Godzilla trivia as well. But I know that you told me that you had some of the alternate titles for this movie pulled up, and I think now is a really good time to hear those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought it was kind of interesting because that was one of them I was going to bring up. Let me pull it up here as I don't have them memorized. There was in Spain they called it Hedorah, the toxic bubble. Let's see. Well, Frankenstein's battle against the devil monsters, of course, in Germany. We had in Belgium, Godzilla against the monster of fog. The Netherlands was Satan's creature.
Okay.
And those are pretty much the best ones.
Okay. I like that. I like the fog monster as well. It's like much less menacing than the smog monster. I wanted to ask you too, does Godzilla ever win on his own merit? I'm sure he does, but as I'm like reminiscing, I'm like, okay, well, he's got help in this one, he's got help in this one, he's got help in this one. The one that we watched, he gets help from the humans, although the help is not very good. I mean, he basically has to beat them out at the end too, but
Right.
They devise the giant drive-in movie theater that shoots electricity.
Right.
And dries out Smog Monster. So I'm just trying to think, like, how many times does Godzilla win just based on being Godzilla?
Well, Godzilla Raids Again, he defeated Anguirus all by himself.
True.
It's the first one I can think of. And then we've got 14 more for me to sit and think about. So I don't think we have that amount of time.
That's perfectly reasonable. But if you are playing along at home and participating in Kaijun, or if this is your first foray into Godzilla films, it's worth paying attention to how often there is some sort of subplot that involves helping Godzilla defeat somebody. We saw it in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. In its sequel, Terror of Mechagodzilla, that also happens as they have the sonic gun that hits Titanosaurus. You know what? In the legendary ones, he does sort of like, I mean, he beats King Kong, but then they have to tag team on the new Mechagodzilla. In King of the Monsters, he does win, I think, on his own merit. Maybe a little. No, there's a mind control thing that the humans had to manipulate. So just off the top of my head, there's a lot of times where Godzilla doesn't just like get to go full Godzilla mode, but if I remember correctly, when they did the redesign
Ooh.
of Mechagodzilla in the 90s.
Yeah.
There's one where they think they've gotten Godzilla beat and he just regenerates and kicks Kiryu's ass.
Well, if you're going to Kiru, that's even further from the 90s. That may even be in the 2000s.
It might
So
be.
yeah, when I said 14, I was still stuck in the Showa era. But yeah, there's usually always something like that. I think actually when you said Mechagodzilla in the 90s, I was thinking of the one where Rodan was in there and they had the baby Godzilla and the guy flew around on the mechanical Pteranodon for some reason. I don't know if you remember that. But I think Rodan ended up pulling a Mothra and giving Godzilla some of his power in that one.
Yes,
So
that
again,
is what happened.
yeah, he doesn't get to go Super Saiyan too often.
When he does, it's a lot of fun though.
Hell yeah. Did you notice are you an Ultraman fan
I
at all?
am. I'm not like the most well versed. I do love Ultraman, and there was this one. I'm convinced now that it was a completely bootlegged copy of Ultraman, where it was basically just highlights from the show, like monster fights, and they
Oh.
were all like spliced together. And my sister used to work at Tower Records, and I would make her rent this video every time I went to her house. And she, like, in hindsight, she's like, I should have just bought it, but it was like $80 at the time, and so she didn't want to buy it. But I, like, as I think back on it, I think somebody at the store must have just recorded this off of their television, put it on VHS, and then rented it out. But definitely should have just bought that.
Yeah. Oh man, I have so many. Like when I was a kid, I had my mom buy me the original Godzilla King of the Monsters with Raymond Burr. She paid like $80-$90 for that. I mean, that was you could pay ridiculous prices even back then. Nowadays, if it's out of print, you can be paying like $100-$200, whatever. But yeah, I went through that. There's the point where they're fighting on Mount Fuji, he and the Smog Monster, and he shoots his laser at Godzilla, and Godzilla does the Ultraman move. He puts the arm at the elbow and the arm up. That cracked me up as a kid.
Yeah, he just sort of like absorbs it, but then also like burns his hand. So it's almost like
Yes,
what we've seen from like Jackie Chan movies where like he'll punch a guy and then he's like, oh wow, like that hurt a lot. And sort of like he reacts in the way that was the opposite to what Bruce Lee had done in those films at the time. Like Jackie Chan was like the non-tough guy, but knew how to fight. But you had mentioned Mount Fuji and sort of like the fight that happens there. But I want to ask you a question about the party, because there is a scene where the party's happening and then they just cut to another shot and there's like there's 5 old dudes just hanging out in the bushes.
Right?
Who the fuck are those guys?
I don't know. I'm like, maybe they live somewhere around there, and they were just like, what are these punks up to? Maybe we should go take a look. I don't know. We never saw them die. I don't think we saw most of the kids die.
But I do love that scene sort of culminates with the rebel punk kids who are enjoying rock music and quite possibly high, because they see a giant like 300-foot smog monster show up and they're like, no, grab the torches, let's fight it.
It's afraid of fire. How do you know?
Yeah, they do state that it's afraid of fire, although I don't believe it had ever been established at any point during the movie that it was in fact afraid of fire.
No.
Oh, that whole sequence is bizarre, because then they basically just all die, and then it's okay, showdown time for the big battle on top of Mount Fuji at the end. And there is a scene where like Godzilla's losing and Hedorah like scoops him up in a weird fashion and flies his ass up the side of Mount Fuji and then just drops him. Godzilla rolls downhill into like a pre-prepared open
crevasse.
Yeah, crevasse. I was like, okay, it's a grave he dug for Godzilla, because it's not the only movie where there's a grave dug for Godzilla. So regardless, he ends up there, and then Hedorah starts like sludging him Just start like
God.
oozing mud, cement, pollution,
So
whatever.
gross.
It's very gross. And that scene's kind of like really sad too, because Godzilla's essentially blinded. He's on his back. He can't get up. And he's just aimlessly shooting his fire into the air and crying.
He kind of screams. Yeah, his roar changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like, oh, wow, he's actually in a position where he's in deep trouble and he's losing. And then like they cut away to the humans and then they come back and Godzilla and Hedorah are just like rolling down the mountain together. And he never escapes from the pit of sludge. They never show like what happens there. And I was sort of disappointed watching it this time because it's very rare that you see Godzilla end up in a highly disadvantageous position against another kaiju. So for him to actually be in a position where he's losing, and I mean, I guess on paper he's kind of being beat at that point. Like if he gets completely engulfed in the sludge and just suffocates, then Hedorah wins. And they just sort of avoid having that confrontation. The next thing we see is the two of them rolling down the hill together. So I felt a little bit cheated in that, but I know that this movie's only an hour and 25 minutes or so. And like you said, the budget isn't really there. You can't have too much going on. You need to get your way to the end of this film because the humans have built these two giant electro screens that they need to trap Hedorah in between in order to win. So they got to find their way down there, and rolling down Mount Fuji is the way that they get down there.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if that's because of recuts after Tanaka got a view at it and brought in Ishirô Honda, or if it was just they didn't have the money to show what happened after that. But I guess they had to get to that point because I think that's where isn't that where Hedorah crashes into the electrical tower and that stops the drive-in theater from working?
Yes, they roll down the hill and they knock down like all of the infrastructure. So again, the military has planned very poorly. Like, we're relying on these two giant monsters not to smash all of the electrical towers in between here and the place that we're trying to lead him to. And in that moment still, they try to figure it out and they still can't. So it's like the humans are like working on this plan. And it was just a very interesting contrast, especially after watching 98 last week, in sort of the military like ineptitude here and how it's comical, and then how Roland Emmerich shows it. And it's like not only is it like military incompetence, but like they also destroy their own stuff and they're more responsible for the destruction of property than even Godzilla is in that movie. So it's just a very interesting sort of shift in the portrayal of how the military does what they do in a Godzilla film, because in the vast majority of Godzilla movies, the military doesn't win. They roll out tanks, they roll out planes. I know the Japanese Army March music. For Godzilla, electric things, the masers, the electric nets that they drop on Godzilla from time to time. So there's always some sort of military intervention. It never works fully, but it's never really framed like the military is the one causing problems. So to see Emmerich's version of it was just a very interesting take on how the military would get involved with Godzilla being in the United States.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about, remember, why did they think flashing their lights at Hedorah would attract him to where it needed to be? I don't think it was ever established that he was attracted to lights like that. The only time he interacted with cars was when he sucked all of them up in the traffic jam, which was another really cool scene.
It was a very cool scene. He hungry hippoed those cars.
Hell yeah. But I don't understand where maybe I missed it. Who knows? But yeah, I don't yeah, that's all the Godzilla 98 movie was. Yeah, Godzilla himself didn't do much of anything. He ran through a building once, I think. And then he hid, and then the military destroyed everything.
It's funny you bring up the flashing lights in Hedorah, because I too was a little confused, but then I went back to thinking he's a stoner. And and they're just flashing the lights at him and he's so high that he's just like, okay, what is that over there? And
That makes sense.
yeah, they don't try to rush him or anything. And in fact, when the one chopper shows up later, it's this chopper that avoided being shot down by Hedorah's laser. It just shows up against orders, and they're screaming at it like, "No, you moron, don't do this right now!" And it's dropping the oxygen bomb at him. But in the moment where the cars are there, it's just this very like rhythmic flashing of the lights, and you kind of see like he's almost hypnotized by it. I'm like, oh, he is such a stoner. I can tell. I know a stoner when I see one, and Hedorah is a stoner.
That all makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of standing around in the last battle, like when they're not actually tussling. And I think it's kind of weird because if you notice, because you had brought this up in their first encounter up at the refinery and whatnot, Hedorah doesn't know how to respond. He doesn't know what to do. Godzilla does his little arm thing at him, and Hedorah does it back. He's like, oh, this is what's going on. So I think he just kind of reacts to what Godzilla is doing, and that's why they just kind of end up standing around for a while, just whatever at each other.
Yeah, he's not nearly as adept at combat as some of Godzilla's other foes. And I think, at least in the depiction of it, it throws Godzilla off too, because he doesn't know what to do. And he gets like sludged in the eye and then loses one of his eyes for the majority of the movie. And his response is he gouges out Hedorah's other eye.
Yeah.
And just jams his hand in there all the way up to like his wrist. So they're both walking around with one eye, and then it gets to the point where they finally like work their way in the final battle to the grid, the dehydration zone,
the drive-in theater. Yeah,
that's all I can think of. Two big drive-in screens, and they get Hedorah, and then he's down on the ground, and Godzilla decides to like start fisting him. I mean, like, it's very graphic to say it that way, but he just decides to reach inside of him and start grabbing stuff. And he pulls out what I thought at first was like, that's an egg. And then I see he's got another one. I'm like, okay, he's got eggs. I'm like, are these his balls? And then I guess they said that it's his eyes. And I'm like, his eyes are very clearly red the whole movie.
Did they say it in the Japanese version? Because I haven't watched that one in a while.
They didn't.
Yeah, that's one of the things I meant to look into, because it's always been a question for myself. I still think they may be eggs.
Yeah, because I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, because we've seen it evolve from like the tadpole stage, right? So it's like, okay, maybe Godzilla's aware of that, and he's going to stop it from procreating and taking over the world, etc. Like, at least that lines up with some of the X's and O's that they've laid out for us in this story. But then in reading like some of the notes about it, it seems like the consensus is that it's his eyes, because his eyes don't open after that, or at least that's what I've read in the notes. But I would have to go back and watch it again, because it's so graphic in the moment that it's happening. I'm like, did he just get castrated? Like, this is intense, because Godzilla doesn't usually get that handsy, and he's like elbow deep inside Hedorah on the ground, just digging around inside of him, and takes out these two little white pearly objects and then dehydrates them in the electric zone.
I think part of it is like once Hedorah's been dried out a bit, it's almost like he's molting, because remember, he jumps back out of there, I think, after this scene.
He does, yeah.
Like, yeah, he's in there still. So maybe these are the old eyes. I don't know. But yeah, he molts, he escapes, and then we bring him back, and then Godzilla's like, you know what? I'm just digging out everything inside of you. And he starts throwing shit left and right. Yeah, it gets really graphic.
He does. He disembowels him and dismembers him, and then zaps him again with the electricity to finally dry him out. But yeah, it's that moment after he rips the orbs out that Hedorah goes flying away, and Godzilla jetpacks himself to go catch him. And I think my favorite thing from that is like, okay, it's goofy. He's got his tail like tucked up by his head, and he's jetpacking his way over there. But when he gets Hedorah, he sort of like changes course, slams him into the ground, then picks him up and goes back the other direction. And when they arrive at the drive-in movie theater, Godzilla like turns his head up to reverse thrust them into the ground. And so I'm like, okay, at least they're paying attention to like the the propulsion physics that they've laid out here for us.
I always thought it was funny. You get the big before he starts flying, he puts his arms out, he turns around, he tucks his tail in, and then you cut to the model, and that tail ain't being tucked in at all. He can't even reach the arms, like he has Tyrannosaurus arms on that model.
I know, because this one is just like, I don't know if it was made from like a plaster cast or something, but it doesn't have the flexibility of a rubber suit. So it could have been even completely done with like the smallest like miniature scale, since they just have to basically like shoot some steam out of its mouth at that point. But they do go through that process. They get into their final battle. We were talking about Godzilla sort of disemboweling him in that final scene and him lighting up the electrical grid again. And I guess I was wondering, like, does Godzilla like not have any fear of being dehydrated by this machine himself? Because they don't really clarify that it wouldn't work on Godzilla, but he's also, big and strong and probably not as reliant on moisture. But
I,
Godzilla's a living, breathing creature that lives in the ocean, so he does like water and live in water for the most part.
I think it's mostly just electricity, and we've seen like in most Godzilla movies, electricity does not affect him unless it's King Kong versus Godzilla.
Unless you need it to.
Right, exactly. Yeah, everything adapts to what the story needs. So yeah, I think he knew that wasn't going to affect him.
It's very interesting though, just to see it all play out, because I really just I liked the setup of the way that it ended. Like, you have this giant towering creature who is very atypical to a Godzilla villain. I think the only taller, we've seen Ghidorah at several points throughout Godzilla history. I think by the time this movie happens, so
Yeah,
we've
but
seen
he's got giraffe heads. I mean, come on.
true, but I'm saying like we've seen something taller than Godzilla, but we've never seen something like Hedorah that was dwarfing him when they stood just sort of like toe to toe and had a much bigger head and was taller and was able to shoot a projectile and was able to fly and like do all these things. And it is a one-on-one fight. And we saw that Godzilla usually has some sort of buddy to help him when he's facing Ghidorah. So very interesting decision to not only sort of design the look of Hedorah this way and to like make him so massive, but to have him not really be able to like engage in physical combat, but still be able to best Godzilla mostly one on one.
Yeah.
Because it makes it dark, it makes it scary, it makes it higher risk for Godzilla than it normally is. And I'm wondering if that's because he is like the representative of humanity in this movie. They say he's like friend to man. He's literally showing up to fight pollution and sort of like make a statement. And one of the sort of user reviews that I scrolled past here said it was like Godzilla's like court appointed movie.
I'm not sure, but you brought up something that I just thought about was later in the series we see a lot of foes that adapt and evolve and change. I mean, this is probably the first one if we think about it.
Mm-hmm. And then they use sort of a similar scale for not scale, but a similar like growth curve for the evolution of Shin Godzilla.
Right, and Destroyer, if we want to. Yeah, I mean, starts as little bitty things, combines. I think, wow, that's and pretty interesting.
With the Mega Gyrus and Mega Nulas.
Oh yeah, yep. Oh, Mega Gyrus is one of the goofiest movies ever.
For sure. But I was just thinking about that too. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He starts as like the little Mega Nulas and then turns into Mega Gyrus. Oh, Godzilla's filled with some very interesting creatures, but I think it's a good time to go to Critics Corner, except for this doesn't have a Metascore, so we're going to be reading user reviews, so it might get even nastier than it normally does.
Ooh.
All right, so let's see. I found a 1 out of 10. And this is from a user named Plankton Rules. Says it's just plain dumb. The movie was designated the worst film in the 50 worst movies book, and I can see why. Now, I must admit up front that I think most Godzilla films, apart from the original, are pretty silly. Most of them I saw as a child, too young to know better. However, I watched this movie only a day ago because I'm crazy enough to want to see all of these 50 worst movies. I mean, yes, it is. See, like, that's how I think that I used to think that, like, this movie is just dumb in that way. And it's kind of like easy to casually brush it aside and just say, oh, like, it's dumb and therefore, like, it's not good. But I think in the greater sort of context of what the Godzilla films are, and especially in watching Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla recently, like the creative choices that they made, sort of the 70s style that leaks into that film and sort of how the 60s style leaks into this, the animation choices here, both from like practical VXF standpoint and from the actual literal animation that they fold into this, like the decisions in the creative storytelling here, I think, are bold and easy to cast aside, but not bad choices.
Also, this person is only watching because it's in a worst of book. I don't know who wrote this book. This could be Golden Turkeys, or this could be what's that other one that everybody always quotes? Is it not the no? Yeah. So they only want to watch the worst movies possible. So that automatically puts them as they're expecting it to be bad. They're not looking for anything entertaining in it at all.
All right, so get out of here, Mr. 1 out of 10. We're gonna
The-
move on to
Beat it, Plankton.
Plankton Rules. No, Plankton sucks. We're gonna move on to Gridoon, who gave it a 3 out of 10. Says Godzilla battles a monster made basically of toxic sludge. And quote unquote, sludge is the operative word here. It's an awful sleep-inducing movie, despite lots of plottingly choreographed action. I haven't seen many Godzilla flicks, but this must rank near the bottom. It does have an honest anti-pollution message, though. Oh, well, I love that he rescued that from the trash heap by saying that its anti-pollution message is honest. And I mean, look, it is maybe a little sleep inducing, but that's because one of the main characters is a big stoner. So what are you going to do? Like, of course, it's a little sleep inducing. If you're staring at those headlights, you might get a little sidetracked.
Gotta lay off the smokestacks, man.
Gotta lay off those smokestacks, man. Okay, so we got a 5 out of 10 here from Y-02311. That's a very original username. It says just don't watch it if you can't handle Godzilla flying through the air or environmental messages. A solid 5 out of 10. This thing, that's the most
What?
this the most empty review. Like, why even write a review of a movie if that's what you're going to commit to paper at that point?
I mean, I can understand the Godzilla flying part, but who oh no, there's the anti-pollution. Well, maybe it's too woke. Who knows?
Right? And Godzilla was too woke back in 1971. Okay, we're going to go to a 7 out of 10. This is from Nerdbat from July of 2018. This film tends to be exceedingly rare on DVD and VHS, and I really wish it wasn't that way. This film made more or less to prove a point that pollution was beginning to become a major problem for much of Japan. With unique music, scenes, and a monster who obviously doesn't fit in with Godzilla's other enemies, it's a one-of-a-kind film. It's a pretty awesome one. I've seen it again and again. It has a few scenes that seem a bit unnecessary, groovy hippie-like music, and scenes of flashing colors don't really bring a lot to the plot or feel for the film. The monster, though, is totally massive, nearly twice Godzilla's size when it's full grown. It's one of the best, in my opinion. I really like it. I would say this is one of the must-sees of the Godzilla franchise. And I agree with you, Nerdbat. If you're going to do a Godzilla marathon, this has got to be one that's in the conversation.
Yeah, I want to be friends with Nerdbat.
Nerdbat, let's go. All right, I'm gonna find a 10 out of 10 review here because I know there's definitely one of them. I scrolled past it. All right, here we go. This is from Movie Nutball. This is January 2005.
Love it.
10 out of 10. Says, great film. I'm a huge Godzilla fan. I grew up with Godzilla. I just love seeing this awesome monster just destroy cities and fighting other monsters. I like his enemies as well, but Godzilla's the icon. This Godzilla film is one of the most unique films, and it's great. The story's very good, and I really like the way Godzilla looks. I love it when he roars and moves his tail. Oh, he's getting a little into it there. As for his enemy, the smog monster, aka Hedorah, he too is awesome. It's cool how the monster attacks, and I also love when he moves. The fights between the two of them are very good. The acting by the film's human stars are also very good, and so is the music. I really love this Godzilla film for many reasons, and if you love Godzilla, I strongly recommend that you do what I did and buy Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster today. That's almost like a commercial for this show, but if you really want to buy it, you're looking at probably $100 DVD at the minimum. But that's a good full spectrum look at all of the sort of like general takes out of it. I like that this one just says psychedelic. This psychedelic Goji entry features a very formidable opponent. 8 smog clouds out of 10.
Nice.
Yeah, but it's nice to see that there's so many different takes. Like there's definitely, I think especially for me too, because I was of that mindset of, oh, I loved it as a kid. I got a little bit older and I was like, that's dumb. And then I got even older and I was like, wait a second, this is great. I forgot the thing that I liked about it as a kid still holds up pretty well. And it's actually smarter than it was when I was a kid. So despite it having like some sort of dumb pitfalls and things like that, it's not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily make it a bad movie. But I'm a little surprised to see that it still has a 6.0 flat on IMDb, because I don't know, for a movie like this that is like so divisive, I guess, amongst Godzilla fans and sort of has the weird history with it, I'm surprised that there's only 6,000 ratings for it. Like that seems really low. I've seen movies like where I thought the low end was like 20, 30,000.
And I was going to say, I think the only other Godzilla film that had such a huge discrepancy between people that like it or don't like it is Godzilla's Revenge. Or I think that was also called All Monsters Attack in Japan. And that's the one where little Ichiro imagines going to Monster Island and hanging out with Minya or Manila. I think that's the only other one that had such a huge gap between fans and not fans.
Yeah, that's where like Godzilla fights a giant praying mantis, and I think there's the big spiders on that one as well. Gabara.
Gabara is most of that stock footage, but Gabara is the new one that they created for that. Yeah. And he's a latchkey kid and blah blah blah. But yeah, that one that one a lot of people just absolutely despise, much like Smog Monster was for many years.
Yeah, and I mean I haven't seen that one in a long time, but I mean I think it's worth a revisit. And
yeah, absolutely.
You know, I'm sad that June is coming to an end because it's been fun getting to watch these movies, and most of them are like 90 minutes too, so I can just plug in, have fun for 90 minutes, like see how ridiculous a lot of it is, but also have just a super high level of appreciation for the fact that these movies did not have big budgets, and you know, so much of this is just guys in rubber suits duking it out. And to think how much the filmmakers and the studio were able to like get out of the idea is pretty remarkable. And when Godzilla lands, it lands well. And I was really glad that we got to, you know, do our little watch party last week and, you know, show a Godzilla movie sort of that we grew up with, that we appreciate, to some other people. And you know, it seemed like Seth liked it. Shauna seemed to have fun with it, so
Yeah, it got some good reactions, man. People were like, "Oh, holy!" Like when Mechagodzilla showed up, they're like, "Wow, that is a really cool design." They were impressed by some of the effects that showed up, like the guy turned into half a monkey face, the model work, and the pyrotechnics. Everybody seemed to really have a good time with it. It was a lot of fun.
It was, and I think that speaks to sort of the quality and the ingenuity of the filmmaking, I want to say, because like I said, it's a lot of it is just guys in rubber suits, and the vision has to be so much bigger than that. And I think that's what I really have come to appreciate in going back and spending more time watching some of these older films, because I think most people who are, film lovers, movie buffs, cinephiles, etc., it's sort of easy to look at the first Godzilla and say like, this is a great film, because it is. And the limitations of the special effects and of the rubber suit and stuff are, excuse me, apparent, but it's also not about necessarily like monster action, right? It's about this metaphor. And so as you move into other Godzilla films and it's more about Godzilla fighting other monsters and more guys in suits and bigger, kind of like crazier concepts, like in Mechagodzilla, where there's a sleeping god creature that they need a statue in the right position at the right time of day, and then a lady's got to sing a 5-minute song like right in crunch time to wake up this god monster in order to get it to help at the right time. Some of like the further you go down the road and the crazier things get, I will never stop appreciating the fact that the filmmakers, the writers, the actors, regardless of the limitations, regardless of some of the simplicity that sort of is encompassing everything, all these people really had to like believe in the concept and believe in the execution. And I think when you really see the high level of what it can achieve, it as a film fan in general, not just as a Godzilla fan, but as someone who loves low budget stuff and loves seeing creative filmmaking sort of push the envelope and get me to suspend my disbelief even though the money isn't there, like Godzilla excels. And maybe it's the thing that really like attracted me to the Godzilla franchise in general, is that you can sort of create this world with a giant monster and all this history and all this mythology, and it's really just a guy in a rubber suit.
Yeah, they ingenuity, man, really makes it work. As you get further into the Godzilla series, from the Showa era, which was 54 up to 74, they get less and less money as they go along. So that they were even able to pull a lot of this stuff off is pretty amazing. But yeah, just to let people see how they took this. I mean, stop motion is where it all started with King Kong and whatnot. That's really expensive to do, and even Hollywood didn't want to do that anymore. Willis O'Brien couldn't get his King Kong sequel that he wanted to do off the ground. That ended up being King Kong versus Godzilla due to shady shenanigans. But Toho, Godzilla, Japan, they knew that with Godzilla, they couldn't afford that. So they did the best they could starting at the beginning. And then they just continued that down the road. I think a lot of it really comes down to the way they shoot it, the model work. As Godzilla gets bigger, the model work gets a little less detailed, which is kind of a, bummer. But yeah, they never stopped trying to do the best that they could.
Yeah, absolutely. And, especially this summer, we had like Fast and the Furious 10. We had, I think, was it Quantum Mania was beginning of this year? We had another big franchise film that came out as well. I mean, Flash kind of was another one of those. Transformers. So we're in a summer this year in 2023 where we're seeing sort of the the depths of franchise filmmaking from studios. And if you were to add up Transformers and Fast and the Furious and throw Flash in there, and even if you want to count Ant-Man in there, though all those films together still don't have the legacy and the longevity of a series like Godzilla that started in 1954 and now has what, 35, 40 films under its belt. I think it's the longest running film franchise in the world, and it's number one with James Bond at number 2.
I believe so, yes. And it's amazing because it's not just from its own home country, it's also over here. We've got Godzilla festival or fan festivals that happen here, Godzilla conventions that have been going on since, I don't know, 93, 94, that happen up in Chicago all the time. There's just a huge fan base here in America, and obviously Hollywood knew it. That's why they did it in 98. That's why before that they were trying to get it done with Steve Miner, make a 3D film. And that's why after 98 failed, they said, you know what, let's try it again, because there's obviously an audience here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they're working on the new one right now. I think it's due out either like early next year, maybe like May, something like that. Which
And
is
a
the
TV show?
sequel. Yeah, that's what I heard.
There's a TV show, there's Kong Skull Island animated, and then there's another MonsterVerse film coming out that should have Godzilla and Kong in it as well. I mean, it never stops.
Yeah, it doesn't. And there's a good reason for that. And, we wouldn't be in a position where the Godzilla property would be available to turn into a large American studio franchise without the guys in the rubber suits. So it is totally worth going back and watching even the ones that you think are maybe bad Godzilla films. There's always a redeeming quality in all of them, even if you think they're silly and goofy and dumb. Just watch it and have fun, and it's totally worthwhile. So I want to ask you, I know you had mentioned was it Godzilla's Revenge?
Yeah, that was the American title, yes.
Is there another one that is like close to Hedorah at all that you would recommend as like a comparable film experience, or maybe another kaiju movie that would sort of fit that bill?
Like a dark but shot well and filmed well kind of thing.
No, just like maybe tonally.
Tonally, well, yeah, so that brings us kind of the dark thing. I would say the Heisei Gamera trilogy that came out in the 90s started with Gamera Guardian of the Universe. And then I can't remember the other two off the top of my head right now, but those three together have the best special effects, the best kaiju effects that anyone's ever seen. It's got a great story. I would highly recommend if you enjoy Gamera Guardian of the Universe, go ahead and finish out the series because it gets better as it goes along.
I believe Gamera versus Gauss is one of those. Is that right?
No,
The bat
that's
creature.
Well, Gauss is in Gamera Guardian of the Universe. Gamera
Gotcha,
Gamera versus Gauss is from the 70s ones.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um,
It's not my specialty, but I have seen a few of them.
Yeah, well, hey, you know what? You should check out the three from the 90s. Dude, I think you'd be really impressed.
Yeah, I've seen actually like videos of them, and I was like, wow, these actually look really good. And then I just always like forget to get around to them. But since we have to wait for at least another year or so until the animated Gamera show shows up on Netflix, I've got time to kill, and hopefully those Gameras are available.
I know the first one is. I think it's on Amazon and it's
Sweet.
subtitled.
Perfect. All right. Well, maybe I got a few more days left in Kaijun. Maybe I'll throw that on at night, hover over one of those smokestacks until I start purring like a kitten and then throw on Gamera.
I can't even come up with something funny to say.
Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and go over this. I'm glad that we got a bonus episode of the show in on short notice. And I'm glad that I found somebody who not only loves Godzilla the way I do, but has such a confident history with it as well, and can enrich my enjoyment of the series and of a lot of the details of it as well. So thank you very much.
Hey, thanks absolutely for having me on here. Man, we don't even have to share all this Godzilla stuff on your pod. We can talk personally. I love being here. Can't wait to be back for whatever we do next.
Don't go. The sea has cobalt, it's full of mercury. Too many fumes in our oxygen. All the smog now is choking you and me.
Thanks again to Nix for taking the time to sit down and talk Godzilla with me. It's always a fun time talking kaiju, and make sure you keep an eye out because he may be popping up again sometime soon to talk about his new project as well. Ad music for this episode was Ronin by Jantrax. And of course, thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to this episode. I know you've got a lot of choices when it comes to podcasts, and I appreciate you spending your time with us. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you do, please consider leaving a rating and telling a friend about it. I'd also love to hear from you, so if you have a bad movie you love and or would like to be a guest on the show, you can contact me on Twitter or Instagram at badmovieswelove, LUV. This show is an extension of thesheist.com, and it is recorded, edited, and produced right here in the home studio by yours truly, and now it's fully integrated in the website too. So until next time, take care, be well, stay safe, and have fun however you get your movies.